It's time for us to renew our conversations with Mr. Bob Pollock. Since Christmas and New Year's were both on Fridays, we haven't had him on for a couple of weeks, and I know that's really bothered you, Bob, hasn't it?
It's been a struggle.
Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. You can call Bob if you have a question at 479-1160. Bob's on the other line right now. Bob, I was noting something that appeared yesterday on the Penn State Extension website. It's an article on greenhouses. It's advising us to evaluate the unit heaters in your greenhouse before you fire them up here in the month of January. That's a good idea, isn't it?
It sure is, because they've probably not been used. Typically, and there's various types of heaters that people use in greenhouses. A lot of times they're gas-fired, but they could be wood-fired. They could be propane, with the propane tanks on the outside of the structure, and then the heating unit inside. You also have wood-fired. Maybe I mentioned that. What am I missing? Anyhow, and sometimes people will put even kerosene heaters inside as well.
Oh, yeah.
And there's advantages and disadvantages to each of those, of course, but usually they're only used for part of the year because you probably don't have things growing in there year-round in most cases, so they're only used during those colder months when you're trying to get seeds started and then moving into the season, and whether that might be to grow vegetable transplants or bedding plants, flowers, or if you're also, planting, say, a tomato crop that you're going to grow in that greenhouse for the entire growing season. But you're right. So because those aren't used as much, they need inspected because they're sitting there. So you can get lines that could get plugged. There could be something that gets in there, or they could be damaged.
All right.
So they do need fired up and checked. The other big issue that we have with heaters in a structure like that can be some of the fumes, the exhaust fumes given off. So if there's any leakage in the piping that takes the flue gases away, that can be a serious issue for plants.
Yeah, and humans.
So that's right, and humans too.
Yeah. Hey, we do have a caller. Let me get to the caller here for you this morning. I have to take you down for a second, and then bring you back. So I'm going to do that. There's Bob should be there, and our caller as well. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. What can we do for you?
I would like to know if when I can buy asparagus, when I can plant it.
Okay. Usually those are purchased as crowns. So they're a perennial vegetable. We plant the crowns. You can order those plants. In most cases, you'll have to buy those online from a nursery, and they'll ship them to you. And you could go on today and purchase them, and then they will typically ship those to whatever region of the country at the appropriate time for spring. So typically we would plant those as early as we can get the ground worked up in the spring. In most cases, that would be sometime during late March into April, early April.
Okay.
Is typically when we would get that job done. And
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Interesting
You're welcome.
plant.
Thank you. Okay, you said interesting plant.
Yeah, because they're just gonna be kind of a mass of this crown with no growth on top. It'll be dormant, and which makes it easier for them to ship them. And you've got this root system there. It's almost crown-shaped in that you'll kind of dig a trench. It's typically how that's done, and then loosen the soil up, and then get the root system spread out in that hole so it's kind of in there naturally is the way it is growing. And then put your soil back in and cover those up.
You know, it's interesting the way you said that to our caller. Is the seed company actually, or the nursery, whoever's going to be shipping them out, they'll hold on to them until it comes time to ship them out, and it's time to plant them, huh?
That's right.
That's interesting the way.
Because if you would get them, in most cases, those may have been a couple ways that can be done, but they could be dug in the fall, or they could be dug early spring as soon as the nursery can get in to get the plants dug. But they'll maintain them, and a lot of plants are maintained that way. They might be dug in the fall and then put in cold storage over the winter at maintaining a certain temperature and humidity level so that those plants are preserved well. But then when spring does come, they're able to just pull them out of storage while they're still dormant, get them shipped to their location, and then they'll still be in good shape and ready to plant. And then and then as our growing season, for instance, the soil start to warm up, the days get longer, and those plants will then naturally come out of dormancy and start to grow.
I was noting something else on the extension website that I thought was really interesting, at least to me. There are new vegetables and new trees that debut every year, and there's actually an organization, All American Selections is the name of the organization, that coordinates vegetable trials across the United States and then decides what are the winners. Let's get them out into the stores. So it's not as if you have to plant the same old thing you've ever planted. There are new things coming out every year.
All the time. It's a real challenge to even begin to keep up on some of that. But it does help that some of these organizations like the All-America Selections, there's the All-American Rose Selections. There's an organization that just focuses on trialing roses in different places across the country. And then the ones that perform the best in multiple locations under various conditions then are ones that are put on a list and recommended, like the Perennial Plant Association. I'm forgetting a couple here.
The seed companies themselves.
Bedding plants, annual flowers, perennial flowers, and then the Garden Writers Association, for example, will pick up on those and from various trials around the country, and then they might write articles related to that, or they'll pick up on these were the best selections this year from the trials in various places across the country. So that can help us as consumers to be able to narrow down that selection and compare what we've been growing and say, oh, maybe I want to try these plants. And you've got a better chance of success picking some of those plants because they've been looked at pretty hard by a number of people, and the people that breed them, the people that develop them, they've, grown and looked at them, and they originally found some characteristic in those plants that was different, that was better, and then that's why that particular cultivar variety was picked up on to begin with, and then they've just taken it from there and compared it to other like plants, and it might only be a flower color. It's different. Yeah. And a lot of times that is the case, especially with annual flowers. It's a different color, or it's a mottled color, or a mixture of colors, or the flower size is larger, smaller, or it flowers longer, something like that.
Yeah. I'm looking at a list of 13 new 2021 vegetables, including the Eschalion creme brulee shallot. And there's a Goldilocks acorn squash. There's the Potapeno F1 pepper, the chard and beet microgreens, the Unagi F1 cucumber, which looks wonderful, the Siam F1 tomato, the red marble cipollini storage onion, the red cloud tatsoi. I'm not familiar with that at all. On Deck F1 corn, Silky Sweet turnip hybrid, the Nero Tondo turnip, and the Purple Sun carrot. Cool stuff that you can see the pictures of them too. You can almost taste them and then spit them out.
That's right, yeah. So sometimes I wonder who thinks up some of these names, in what combinations, what came about to come up with that. Some of them are pretty crazy. With vegetables, a lot of times the only difference might be better disease resistance. A particular set of diseases for a particular plant. That might be what the goal was when they bred that particular variety. So otherwise it looks the same as, for example, any cucumber might, but the difference is that it has resistance to another strain of like verticillium wilt or cucumber mosaic virus, and that's typically what happens with those. Although in more recent years, colors have become important. We know that there are different colors, and that carrot might be an example of that.
Yeah, the purple carrot.
They're purple. So we know those colors have different antioxidant levels, which our body needs, and can be beneficial to help us fight off various organisms that are attacking us. So those antioxidants can be important. So a lot of colors have been able to be, a lot of vegetables that used to be just yellow or green or orange might come in a variety of colors now.
I see another of the applications might be this one, that Siam F1 tomato is something you can grow in your windowsill. If you've got a sunny windowsill or a counter, you don't need a garden. And it's a mini tomato. So, that's just giving you the option, particularly if you're a city dweller, that you can do it without a lot of space.
Yeah, so dwarfing. And with tomatoes, we have determinate varieties. So those are plants that are going to grow to a certain size with leaves and stems, and then once they pretty much get to that size, then they start to flower and produce fruit. And once they start to flower and fruit, then they quit growing. And then, of course, we have the indeterminate tomato varieties, which grow, and then that branch will grow to a certain point. It'll set flowers and fruit, but then it'll also continue to grow.
Yeah.
And it'll set another truss of flowers. So it gives you less yield at any particular point in time, but over the course of that plant's production cycle, you'll probably get as much fruit or maybe more fruit than you would on that single determinate plant that produces its fruit all at one time. But there's advantage, if you don't use a lot of tomatoes all at once, then that indeterminate plant can be a good way to go. And if you want to can, for example, maybe you want all your fruit at one time, so you can do that process all at one time.
Cool stuff this morning here with Bob Pollock. What a way to kick off 2021, huh?
Yeah, it's very good.
Maybe next week we'll get into those the new trees and shrubs that they're recommending. Bob, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.